Good evening, everybody. I'm David Sproles, president of the New York School of Interior Design, and we are thrilled to have you here this evening for the talk by Michael Graves, A Case for Humanistic Solutions in Healthcare Design. And after the lecture, you are all invited to a reception in our 69th Street Gallery, which is right behind us, where you will be able to view the current exhibition, Maggie Center's A Blueprint for Cancer Care, which, like Michael's talk tonight, looks at the connection between design and healing. Michael has been a longtime friend of the college. He has been on our advisory board for more than a decade and serves as a program advisor for our one-year Master of Professional Studies program in Healthcare Interior Design, one of the only programs in the country focused on interior design and healthcare. NYSID also granted him an honorary doctorate in 2011. He has been an invaluable advisor and advocate for NYSID, and we are thankful to him for his guidance as we grow our institution. Now, it seems almost silly to attempt to provide a synopsis of Michael Graves' career, since his architecture and design projects are so well known and his accomplishments too numerous to list. Nevertheless, I will try to do so. He is undoubtedly one of the most influential architects of our generation and is rightfully credited with broadening the role of architect in society and raising public interest in good design as essential to the quality of everyday life. That's a mouthful. He founded his practice, Michael Graves and Associates, in 1964 and taught at Princeton University for almost 40 years. His firm has designed master plans in architecture and interiors of over 350 buildings worldwide, including hotels and resorts, restaurants, retail stores, civic and cultural projects, office buildings, healthcare, residences, and a wide variety of academic facilities. I don't think I left anything out. But he did not stop there. Graves also embarked on the world of product design, designing everything from teapots to furniture to wristwatches. His firm has designed and brought into the market more than 2,000 products for clients such as Target, JCPenney, Stryker, and Disney. Of course, tonight we are here to learn more about his work in healthcare design, which became a priority for him after his own personal healthcare tragedy in 2003. From designing a more comfortable and safe hospital wheelchair to universally accessible homes as part of the the Wounded Warrior Home Project, the impact his work has on the world of design and healing cannot be underestimated. So I am thrilled to introduce Michael Graves.
Thank you, David. That was very nice. It's very nice to be here to give this talk. I'm glad the shoe's on my foot tonight because one of the times I was here, I remember we were having a committee meeting and they wanted me to see one of the students' work who had chosen as her thesis healthcare design, the patient room. And since that's what I concentrate on, I was very excited by it all. I said to her, after looking at her work, which was not to my liking at all, I said, "Have you ever been in a wheelchair?" "No." "That would be interesting." I said, "Yes, it would be. I really think you should go to your local airport or to your local hospital and sit in a wheelchair for a day and wheel around and drop a piece of paper in front of you and see if you can pick it up and just see what other people do with you in a wheelchair and so on." I didn't say it like that. I was livid. I remember using the F word. Because I really think there's no time for us to waste. We really get on with doing healthcare in a way is going to make a difference. I've only got so much time left. I'm really, since I was paralyzed 11 years ago, we made room on my plate in the office to do as much health care as we could. In fact, today I'm waiting on pins and needles to hear if we got a new job. I'll know today or tomorrow, so wish me well. I think I probably should start, and because we've only got an hour, and this talk should take about 3 hours. I won't tell you that many stories. I want to be a little autobiographical with the start here. I'm from Indiana, and I went to the University of Cincinnati because it was cooperative and I could work my way through school. 2 months of work and 2 months of school, 2 months of work and 2 months of school. So that was how I started, and then I went to Harvard as a graduate student, and after Harvard I worked in New York for a year for George Nelson, who some of you know who he is. He worked for Herman Miller mostly and did other things. But I was doing architecture for George. Meanwhile, in the office I saw how product design was managed and put together. That was pretty interesting for me in those days, though I had no idea that I would do what I'd have done at that time in the late 1950s. And then I applied to the American Academy in Rome, and of all things I won a Prix de Rome, and here's the Academy, and you can imagine how this Hoosier pulling up to the Academy the first day that I arrived in September 1960, and they said, "This is where you're going to live for the next 2 years." I said, "This can't be true. Look at this place. This is a palace." And indeed it was a palace for me, and being on its board of trustees for too many years, it's only gotten better with age. But I looked at this place in awe, and I didn't know that this would be, oops, sorry. I need another. Now, these are not my friends, so I just want you to know that we'll try to make them friendly. I didn't know that this would be my terrace, this would be my studio, and I would have a view out over the city. I could look over to the French Academy on the other side of town, but this is the way in, and so on. And I tell you that I drew every day that we had good weather in Rome, and that's a lot of days. And at night, we all gathered together for dinner at one long table in the Academy dining room. And after I'd been there for a few days, I learned to keep my mouth shut, because I heard my fellow academicians who were in scholarly fields, not architecture, but humanistic studies and Renaissance studies and so on, talk about what they'd done during the day and what they had found and what they were writing about. And I thought to myself, these people are really smart. I mean, really smart. And I was educated in a way to know who Mies van der Rohe was when I was an undergraduate, and who Le Corbusier was when I was a graduate, and I never heard of Palladio. And I remember the dean at Harvard when I had a big elephant volume open on my desk, looking at Tony Garnier's Paris Opera. He said, "What are you looking at that for?" I said, well, because we're doing a theater and I want to look at the section of the Paris Opera. And he slammed it shut with all his might. We called him Teeny Weeny Deeny. He was only about this big. And he said, you won't need that here at Harvard. We don't do history. That's Harvard. So that was a waste of time. But here I was at the Academy, and I was around people who really did know history. And so I was very anxious to see what, and to know what they knew, but I decided very much on my own that I would be very quiet at dinner, because that's when everybody talked to everybody else, and I gave kind of one-word answers, and I didn't want anybody to find out that I was uneducated. So every night I went to this room, which is the library of the American Academy, and after dinner I taught myself for a year. I drew, I read, I traced, I absorbed all I could, from Vitruvius to Palladio to Vignola to all of those who had written treatises on architecture, and then to the buildings. And I had a grand time. And I thought, my God, what a rich life I'm going to have, which I had no idea after 7 years of school that this was all waiting for me. But I did this every night, and then the second year I was at the Academy, I dared open my mouth at dinner. And I found that I didn't know as much as they did, but I didn't embarrass myself. Here I am in 1960, drawing out on the street this big piece of paper, much too big to look at the building and then at the drawing, and then at the building, and then at the drawing, and losing all sense of proportion. My friend Leonard Anderson, who's a New York painter, still said to me one day, Michael, if you had a little sketchbook, you could hold it here and draw and look at the same time. Oh. So I did that from that point on, but these drawings were good to me because I had a stack of them in my room, and the director, working with other architects in the building that didn't draw, just collected postcards and I don't know what else they had, gelatos, but he couldn't take the guests that would come to the Academy to their studios, so he always ended up in my studio, and they would look through these drawings, and then he would say, Michael sells these, you know. And the reason I sold them is because we had $5,000 for a trip over and back on the Cristoforo Columbus ship, and for a year's stay. So it wasn't a lot of money, and I was married at the time, so there were two of us. And so $50 was a lot for these drawings, I thought, and it allowed me to travel all over Europe because I sold most of them. So I was very pleased about all that. And here are the kind of drawings on these big Arches papers called 30 by 40 inches, San Carlino alle Quattro Fontane, and St. Peter's on the right. So I did a lot of drawing. Most of it washes, like San Carlino there, and some of it ink drawings, but never in color. And then I found Corot. And when I found Corot, I thought, why aren't I painting? And I found that Corot so intimidating that I didn't paint. I waited till I got home, and then I started to teach myself to paint through Corot. So I repainted all of the Corot paintings, of Rome, while he was at the French Academy. And so here's sitting on the side of the hill, looking back at the city at sunset. That's why it's all terracotta like that. So this is my version of Corot. And there, if I had time, I'd show you a dozen more. This is just funny. I was asked to teach a course at Princeton when I was a young tad, the first year out in 1962. And it was called Spots and Dots. And it came from Joseph Halber's course at Yale. And here's a little model that a student had made for me. This picture is taken by Richard Meyer, who, because my class was oversubscribed, and the director of the school said, get one of your fancy New York friends to come help you because you've got too many students. He didn't care who it was, so I just called Richard. He came down. Now, when I got started in architecture, it's hard because it's kind of catch-22. You can't do one till you've done one. They always want to see your portfolio and so on. I remember getting a recommendation for a house for Nelson Rockefeller's son, and from the Museum of Modern Art, they knew my work, and then Rodman Rockefeller and his wife wanted to see pictures of all my other houses. That was just funny to me. I said, all right. So I rearranged my apartment in 30 different ways, with different light and different shadows and different paintings and different posters and different everything, and just went through it for them. And these were my projects that I showed them. I got the job. We didn't build it though. I was a little too far gone for them. They really wanted something old-timey, and I guess I didn't know how to do that in those days. But some of my work was published, a cultural bridge, as they called it, in Fargo, North Dakota, and Moorhead, Minnesota. A bridge across the Red River of the North, connecting the two little towns, and then a building on either side. And I won that competition. It was never built because they voted on it against a golf course, and the golf course won by a vote. So we never built that, but it got published everywhere, and that was almost as good as building it. In fact, the Japanese still go to Fargo looking for the bridge, I'm told. But I got invited to Portland to give a lecture like this, and they said, what can we do to entice somebody like you? I already had stripes. It was incredible. Somebody like you to participate in a competition we're going to have for a new City Hall annex here in Portland. And I said, ask. And so ask they did, and I entered the competition, and luckily we won. And that was the Portland building. And so now I did have the beginning of a portfolio. And then I had 5 more competitions, and we won all 5. And I said, aha, this is how it's done. And the next 25, we didn't win. So it wasn't as easy as I thought. But here is Portlandia. There's now a television show called that, but here it is. They want to make all buildings, all civic buildings in Portland and state and federal buildings in Portland resistant to the earthquake. Well, this one is resistant to the earthquake, but there are new guidelines. And so to bring them all up to date, they don't know whether to tear all these buildings down and start over or to renovate them. So this may not, if I come next year, this may not be here. So I hope that they renovated. This was the next competition, which was a winery in the Napa Valley called Clos Pegase, which has just been bought by Dean and DeLuca. Who knew? So I don't think they'll sell salami there, but they Dean and DeLuca are going to get into the making of wine, which is interesting. It could be very, 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 very nice what they would do. So this was that building, and one competition and a winner of the competition gets another invite, and so we got another invite, and this is much later on. But as I say, we won several in a row: a library in San Juan Capistrano, and some other buildings, the Portland building, the Humana building, which I think I'll show in a minute. But this is a library in Denver, Colorado, which was one of the biggest of the competitions that we won. This is the rare book room up here, there. And it was interesting, given that the G7 is meeting now in Brussels, I guess, somebody from the G7 called the mayor of Portland and said, "We're coming to Portland for our next meeting. Give us the grandest room you have in the city to have our meeting." And that took place in this room up here. So I was very proud that the mayor had taste. I also liked it that Gorbachev, or I guess it was Khrushchev came on a bus and then took the city bus from his hotel to the Portland building, to the Denver building. This is the Humana building, which when I did it, they owned hospitals, about 100 hospitals, and now I think they are an insurance company now. But they had a marvelous pair of people, the CEO and the president, who made the best, one of the best client groups I've ever worked for. They were just terrific. In fact, the president, not the CEO, but the president, had a collection of de Chiricos and Joseph Hoffman, two of my favorites. And he was from a town where there were 37 people in Horse Cave, Kentucky. So I thought, well, I'm from Indiana and he's from Kentucky. If he could make it, maybe I can too. But I wanted to do all the interiors of the building, and there wasn't some group of people in those days called space planners. There were only architects and interiors people, and the interiors people were called decorators, but they learned to call themselves something else. But the decorations they did were not bad. But I asked if I could design the furniture and design the light fixtures and so on. They said, anything that you can have made for the same cost as you can buy it off the rack and get it done and installed in time, you can do. Now that's a client. That was really wonderful. So here's one of the lights that we did for Baldinger. Now it's been knocked off so many times that it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. Baldinger died and he's therefore out of business, but the collection has been sold to another company, and we've just started to receive prototypes of a whole new line of lights that we're doing for them. But that was just one of the things that we got to do for Humana building. The Alessi tea kettle came in a kind of awkward way. I did a series of showrooms, interiors only, for a furniture company called Sonar. And some Italians saw the one in California, in Los Angeles, and when Alberto Alessi was going to come to the United States with his collection, he wanted to do it in a rather special way. He wanted to have a dozen architects design sterling silver, not stainless steel, sterling silver tea services, and that he would have them placed in galleries such as Max Protach and so on here in New York, and also in various museums all over the country. He wanted to bring Alessi to the States, not through the housewares department at Bloomingdale's or from where you can buy a Revere kettle at the hardware store, but instead to make what he was bringing as art. He did that, and it was a huge success, and it did travel all over the States. And so it was a very nice exhibition of these dozen architects. He didn't want to sell any more than, he priced it all up because some of the museums wanted to buy a set. And so these things ranged in cost from $25,000 to $40,000. Sterling silver wasn't bad. There was a tea kettle, a coffee pot, a sugar, a creamer, a spoon, and a tray. And that was the program, as it were. And so I did mine. I should have a picture of it for you. I did mine, and I think a little picture of it's coming up. But after I had done mine, it started to sell. And they sold 5 sets, and then 10 sets, and then 15 sets, and he was getting pissed off because he really didn't want to sell it because he wasn't making them. His cousin in Venice was making these things. He did stainless steel, and that's all he did, stainless steel. So I was invited to dinner at the White House. My star was high in those days, and I went to the dinner, and it was during Reagan's administration, so I wouldn't be invited to a Republican's administration. Not me. Anyway, I was, and I'd heard the food was good, so yes, indeed, I went. But I was encountered during the evening by a Marine who came up to me at dinner and said, "Mrs. Reagan would like to see you in the Blue Room afterwards." And I said, "Well, I don't know where it is." And he said, "I'll take you." So we went to the Blue Room, and she said, "Michael, I know you don't know why you've been invited to the White House, but it's really because we hear that, and I've read, that you love the little museum we have down in the lower level, Reed basement of the White House, where they keep the silverware and the china for all the different presidencies. And it's really fascinating. So if you go to the White House, ask to see that, because there's a big difference between one administration and the next. And I really did enjoy seeing it, and I've seen it a couple of times now. And she said, "And we would love to have your Alessi tea service in that collection. We can't buy it. It has to be given to us. So we're really asking you for a gift." I said, "Mrs. Reagan, I would love to, but I'm an architect." That's funny. Meaning I don't have any money. Every day is just next to poverty. So I said, "Well, I don't own one, so you can't have mine. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll ask Alberto Alessi if the Alessi family and maybe the Italian government would like to make a gift of a tea service to the White House and the Reagan administration." So I asked Alberto Alessi. I should say, give a caveat now, if there is a Republican in the audience, I doubt that there is, because you're all smart people. But if there is, this is nothing against Ronald Reagan or Nancy Reagan. They're delightful people. And in the end of this story, Nancy had a wonderful sense of humor about what I'm about to tell you. So I'm not telling stories about Republicans, just this story. So I said I would do that, and I asked Alessi the next time I went to Crusinello and where their factories are, and he said in Italian, "Say again?" And I told him again. He said, "One more time?" And I told him, and he said, "Tell Mrs. Reagan that Alberto Alessi and the Italian government say this." Well, I told that story like I am to you tonight, in a lecture. It got in the New York Times, and we sold 40 sets after it had been in the New York Times. So Alessi was really upset with me for selling so many sterling silver tea services. But he did come to me because I was selling so much and asked me to design a stainless steel teapot that would boil water faster than any other teapot on the market and be at what he called an American teapot. Well, I didn't know what an American teapot was, and I knew that water boiled just about as fast here as it did in Italy. So I designed this with a little bird, and after I got a postcard from a French poet, he started by saying, "Dear Mr. Graves, goddamn you." And he said, "I'm a very grouchy person. It takes me most of the day to wake up, and I own your tea kettle, and that stupid bird wakes me up and it makes me smile. You have made me smile in the morning, goddamn you." So I knew that maybe that was an American pot, and that the little bird made it somehow American. But I did it because I would spend the summers in my uncle's farm, and the rooster would wake us up in the morning, and I thought that was somehow coincident with boiling water for your coffee. Now, we did 150 objects for Alessi. Here's the tea service, by the way, down here. That's mock ivory, it's not real ivory. I learned how to do that kind of stuff. But here's the whole tea kettle family. It grew into it had all these offspring. But there were lots of different collections for Alessi. He's gone on to, we haven't done anything for him recently because he's hiring young designers now. Maybe some of the students could send him drawings of things they've done. He might like it. We worked for Steuben, and we put them out of business. It was really good. We went up to upstate New York to their factories and watched people blow glass. And these were all three blown, and to see how that was done. But they said that they wouldn't do anything for me until I blew glass for them, because I ought to know how hard it was. And they said, "What do you want to make?" I said, "Oh, I don't know, an ashtray." So I did an ashtray, which you all would call a doorstop. It was just a lump of glass. So I learned not how to blow glass, but how to make a lump. The next story is how all went from Alessi to Target. I was sitting in my office with some Target folks, waiting for some people to arrive from another group of Targeteers who were going to come and talk to me about the Washington Monument. And the other group, the second group, was late. And so we, I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I told Mrs. Reagan the story later, and she thought it was hilarious, so please don't send me a postcard, Mrs. Reagan. But anyway, the other group was late, and during that time we were sitting at my conference table, and my sketchbook was sitting in front of me, was closed, and the man sitting next to me was Ron Johnson, who later became CEO of Penny's. That's another story. But Ron was kind of heir apparent at Target in those days, but instead he went to Apple. But he said, "Is that your sketchbook, Michael?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Could I look at it?" And I said, "Of course." So I looked at my sketchbook. He said, "Michael, these are marvelous drawings. These are great things. This is what we do at Target." I really didn't know what Target was because we didn't have any Targets in the East. They were all in the Midwest and around Minneapolis and so on. They didn't have very many. They really exploded in the last 20 years and have them everywhere, and now in Canada. But anyway, they had decided to pay for the renovation of the Washington Monument, and indeed they did, and they asked me to design the scaffolding. They didn't want me to do a Christo. They want it covered up. They wanted me to tell stories, as they said. So I said, if you'll do a little pamphlet, a little book for the kids, we could tell stories, because I want the kids to know what is an obelisk, what is the mason, why does the masonry need work on it done? What is it about masonry that isn't forever? What is a running bond, which is what the Washington Monument is? Who was Washington? Who was L'Enfant? And so on. And they said they would, and they did. And we had a grand time. And this took about 2 years to repoint the whole monument and to renovate the interior. And then I got a call, again from the White House, but this time it was Mrs. Clinton, and she asked if I could ask Target to keep the scaffolding on. Scaffolding is just rented, and it was finished about 2 months before the turn of the millennium. But if I could keep it, I asked them to pay for 2 or 3 more months rent for the scaffolding while we turned the millennium, because they wanted to use it as a backdrop for the whole affair. They were going to have a big party and so on. And so here's what it looked like. I remember her saying, the French have the Eiffel Tower, and now we have your monument, and it'll be terrific. Because the monument's not lit at night, except when it's under reconstruction, like this one. So we did, and they did, and I went to dinner again. And so we did, I don't know how many, but over 1,000 objects for Target. Here are some of them you know. A toaster, and I wanted to do a chessboard because that was one of the best things that ever came out of the Bauhaus. They did a chessboard that folded up very neatly and had a very abstract chess pieces and so on. And I wanted to do our own, so we got to do that. That wasn't bad for $39.95. And this is parquet wood and so on. And we worked for 15 years for Target, and that contract kind of exhausted itself, and they had their own design department. In fact, when I started with Target, they had no designers working for them, and when I ended, they had 500. They have several floors of their corporate office is now all designers doing all their clothes. No more, I'm trying to think of his name, Mazrai. Isaac Mazrai. Isaac's gone, and there were about 17 of us, the kind of stuff that I was doing, working in the stores, and then they started doing it themselves, and now everybody's gone. So I went to Penny's when Ron Johnson called, and he said, I've got this marvelous idea. I'm going to have shops within the store, and we'd like to put your things that you would design for us in the shop. Well, we did that, and you know probably the trouble that JCPenney has had, and Ron went too far probably, but he's no longer CEO, and they're trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and now all of us that had shops no longer have shops, so that's really a downer. Here was my shop at Penny's. This is the one in Princeton, where I'm from. But that was really a gift inside a department store to have all of that. And, you know, anybody was having a birthday or something like that, you just go and buy a toaster, or buy a waffle maker, buy something. They were all wonderfully made, and probably a little too much for pennies. It probably was up. I remember one of the board members saying, would be better at Neiman Marcus. Well, that was not a nice thing to say, because he was saying that it wasn't going to sell with the penny customer. But we're still there, and we're going to be there for 6 more years. And then this date is the date that I will not tell you the story of how I got paralyzed, but it's gruesome and difficult for me. But nevertheless, I had a sinus infection, which went from my sinuses to my brain to my spine. And the next morning I woke up without the use of my legs or most of my body. And that was that date. And here I am in one of these marvelous facilities that I went to, one of 8 hospitals and 4 rehab centers. And this was a rehab center designed by experts. I asked the surgeon, the local director of the hospital, who designed his rehab center, and he told me, experts. This is the knee of my therapist, and she's chastising me I just got my sneakers on. It took half an hour, and she was waiting for me. And she said, you know, Michael, it would go much faster if you'd use Velcro sneakers. I told her I couldn't, they were too ugly. And she nodded in agreement. But I asked her, I said, you ready for anything? There are 3 potty chairs over here. Anything can happen in here. And I'm sure the Prince of Chintz did not do this. But you're made to feel like Mert when you're in these places. It's not a place for healing. It's not that you have to have taste. Well, yes, it is. But it's certainly not done with anybody who's paying any attention, these so-called experts. I'll leave that up for a minute while I tell you a story. That day, my therapist said to me, Michael, you hate it here so much, I'll let you out if you can do the following. Put all your clothes on yourself tomorrow morning, go into your bathroom and shave and brush your teeth and comb your hair and all of that. Get into your wheelchair from your bed by yourself, and so on. So I said, oh boy, I can do that. And so I lined up all my clothes in reverse order on a chair next to my bed with my underwear on top, and got dressed. It took about an hour, and then I used a sliding board and got off the bed into my wheelchair and smiled and was feeling very self-empowered and thought, this is terrific, I could go home. Then I had to do the rest. I had to go in the bathroom and do the toothbrush and all of that. So I got in the bathroom. The first thing I noticed was I'm in my wheelchair, and the mirror stops at this point here and goes up, clearly for somebody standing. 99% of the people in this rehab facilities are in wheelchairs, experts. So I thought, well, I can't comb my hair, I don't have much hair anyway. And then I thought, well, I'll brush my teeth. And I reached for the faucet and the knob, and it was out of reach. And same thing for shaving. I couldn't reach the hot water either for shaving. And I thought, well, I'll have somebody from my office bring my electric razor tomorrow, and I'll just wait. And then I thought, well, you'd better see where the outlet is for the electric razor. I looked around, and it was 2 inches above the floor on the wall down here, and this is as far as I can reach. So that was out to experts. So at that point, the doctor came in for his morning rounds, and I said, Doctor, I would like your time for you to answer a question of mine this morning instead of my answering a question of yours. He said, okay, what is it? I said, I'd like you to go out in the hall and get one of the disused wheelchairs and get in it and wheel yourself in here. He said, oh, all right. And he did that. And I said, now go into the bathroom. Pretend you're going to comb your hair. He said, oh, the mirror's too high. Now brush your teeth. And you're me, not you. You have no stomach muscles anymore. He said, I can't reach it. And he said, then he backed himself out and he said, so what's the point? I said, well, you're spending $40 million on a new addition to this facility. Are the same experts doing the addition? He said they were. And we talked about his alternatives of what he could do to help his experts the next time. He didn't do that. And the new wing is exactly like the old wing. Some people do not learn. Now, I should move along a little bit. This is the state of affairs in our hospitals. It's not terrible, but I've circled a few things. This lady cannot reach her television because of the rail on the side of the bed. So those two things need coordination. Or she needs the television set on a little remote which exists, which would bring it over in front of her. If she uses a tissue here, if she were able to get the tissue through her bed rail there, after she's finished with it, it's a real NBA hook shot to put it in the wastebasket over here. On the heater is a female urinal. Heater, urinal. Not really what you want to do. I didn't ask her about the male urinal, which is there on this end of the bed, and here she is, much younger, and this lady is taking a little nap. And I show it to you here because she's done something to her chair, got out of bed, and is doing something in her chair to help her circulation, which you can't get in your bed. But to do that, she's put can you see? She's put a sheet down here on the chair as to not catch anybody else's cooties, as a lot of people do. I didn't know they did do that, but they do. And so we designed two little catches in back that you could stick the sheet in the catches, and the sheet won't fall off, because the sheet would fall off and then go on the ground, as this one has, and then the nurse would trip, and the nurse would break her leg, and then the nurse would be in the bed, and she would have the same problems that that lady has. There's an ad like that on television. Here's an over-the-bed table. Underneath it, that has never been cleaned since 1933. There's some gum here turning green. It's got little furry stuff on it. That had a drawer here, which pulled out there, long since gone. And the cleaning service does not clean this. I thought to myself, as an oxymoron, could I have an effect on infection by the furniture I designed for the patient room? Furniture, infection, that doesn't make any sense at all. And I said, yes, I can. And so I knew that this was part of my task, because 99,000 people every year die of hospital-borne diseases. Think about that the next time you have your appendix out. All right. So there's tripping and falling. There's infection control. I'll show you what we did to help the infection control. And then there's just the clinician's back that you want to save as well. And these are three areas that we wanted to do something about in our furniture design. So Stryker gave us, they're a manufacturer of not only hips and ankles and things, but they also do furniture. But we did a over-the-bed table for them, and I made a big paddle here, which is the thing that you use to make the top go up and down. In their current one, you stick your hand in a cavity over here, like the Bocca della Verità in Rome, and you press up to go down and down to go up. So we took their mechanism and turned it upside down. And now up goes up and down goes down. And we made a great big handle here. And another one over there. We weren't modern designers. We wanted to be very obvious about all of these places so that the cleaning crew would see them and clean them, because they didn't want the cooties to get from one patient to the next. Then we divided the top so that your cell phone and your tissues and so on could go over here, and your food tray could go there. Because if that's not clean, when your lunch comes or your breakfast comes, your food is put out in the hall to get cold and wait till the nurse brings it in, because the food people service aren't allowed to touch your tray table. So that's how that goes. So those are some of the things that we did to that. We also designed a chair, which we call the stand assist chair. Now look at the arm of this chair. It does this. It has this little shepherd's crook at the end of it. I had seen a man who was probably 90 years old and had a stroke before I started working on this chair in a restaurant, and he stood in this position for a good 10 minutes, lowering his bottom down for a little bit, then standing up, then lowering it down, standing up, frightened to death that he was going to miss the chair altogether. And I thought, boy, if he had my chair, his chair didn't have handles, didn't have arms. But if it were like this person here with the handles there, he could put himself back down in the chair, as she has done here. Tonight, when you get to bed, sit on the end of your bed, and when you're about ready to swing your legs into bed, and instead put your nose over your toes and stand in this position and see how the equilibrium of your body takes care of all the muscles you're in a perfect position. The clinician tells you, the therapist tells you, nose over toes, always, to get into a sitting position. But of course, this goes both ways, sit down or stand up. But this is all we did to this chair. We also made this little unit, which I call R2D2. And this drawer goes both ways because we saw nurses putting these bedside tables up against the bed and you couldn't open the drawer. So we did it so the drawer would open both ways. And then we have a wastebasket. The nurses love this because they know where the wastebasket is and they can take that off and dump it into a larger barrel, and it's terrific for them. And then here's their tabletop, which goes down as well. But the nurses can use that to write their notes, which they have to do every day. And here's the way you can use the two together now. We took pieces away from this, we put it on a diet, we took the second level out and all of that, and now we put some of those things over here in R2D2, and now you can use the two together. So you could have your food here and your cell phone and your laptop and so on, and open the drawer here. And here's that little collection of things we did for Stryker. And then for Stinson, we designed fabric not only for the chairs, like there, but also for the curtains, the privacy curtains, which are there. And we're very proud of that. Here's our over-the-bed table. And this is a wheelchair that if you're in your bed and you're now going to have an MRI, let's say, or a CAT scan, you might wait, you'll be put in a cot probably, you'll be put on a cot and taken down to imaging and wait for them to be ready for you, which can take up to an hour. Or you'll be put in the wheelchair of the hospital, which was designed, in fact, in 1933. It's the X-frame. It's everywhere. It's in the hospital. It's at the airport. It won the day. But it's terribly uncomfortable, and you sit on a X-frame base here, and it's really not good for your posture at all. But this is what we did for Stryker. This is called the Prime TC being transfer chair, and it's so that the orderly will guide you from behind here and take you down. So you don't put your hands on the big wheel anymore. They don't want you to do that because you're getting infection in your hands from the tires. And so that's not a good thing. We wanted the arms to fly back like this, which they do, so you can make a side transfer. And we wanted, this is a big tripping hazard on the 1933 version. So this pulls out of the way, and then the orderly can stand on this little, or put his foot on that little button there, and this will flop down, and your feet go on it. And here it is from behind, where the air tube is here, the CO2, and then the IV pole is there. They've just given us a new contract to redesign the IV pole because the stuff up here was putting people's eyes out. They had little metal rings and hooks, and it was just the height of the orderlies who would push the chairs around the hospitals. So this is Prime TC, just won a big award in Europe, so we're happy about that. So is Stryker. Then I'm going around the country talking about healthcare anywhere I can because we need hospitals to design, and I want to do as many as I can before I croak. And here's a house for the wounded warriors. And we were asked by Fort Belvoir and Clark Realty to design a couple of prototypes, which we have done now. we did this one and this one, and this started off as a rotunda out here, a little TV room, sitting out there, and the contractor said to me, "Can't do round buildings." And I said, "What can you do?" He said, "Straight lines." I said, "Say octagon." So they're doing octagons now, and here's the octagon right there. And then we put a trellis over the windows here, and we've got wisteria growing up there. So it should be very pretty. Here's what they have now, but these are 2 and 3 stories. So these guys are coming back, the wounded warriors are coming back with amputations, with burns, with partial blindness, with PTSD, and a host of other ailments. And they are allowed to sign up or re-up for another 2 years. So the Army puts them in these bungalows. And these buildings are pretty nice. You can get a wheelchair to turn around in a galley kitchen, and the heating unit, the oven top goes up and down, whether you're standing or sitting in a wheelchair. These units slide out, so you can put your knees underneath if you're going to do the dishes there without putting them in the dishwasher and so on. The corridors are 5 feet wide, an extra foot, so that you can turn around after you say goodnight to your kids. You can get out of the corridor and get to your own bedroom. This is what we call a trough drain. I'm the biggest proponent of trough drains, because this is what I didn't have when I was in rehabilitation. This was a curb, and this was the shower, and the floor would get wet, and the water wouldn't go across the curb, and everybody was happy, except the patient, who had to be lifted over the curb, which was 4 inches high, by 2 huge men, and your chair. So you had a shower chair and people of all sizes lifted over these curbs. A trough drain collects the water, doesn't let the water on this side. In my house, I have one. It's perfect. This side of the room never gets wet, not one drop. So that's what we do now. And those are the simple kind of things. I could go on in this house and show you all the stuff. We don't have time, but it's just the kind of simple seat of your pants, common sense stuff that's like that. This is Madonna, which is in Nebraska. They have a hospital now in Lincoln, Nebraska, and it's a wonderful facility. And this one is going to be east of Lincoln in another town, and this is the entry and the chapel, and this is rehabilitation over here, and I'll show you that. So here's the inside of rehab. There's thoughts now of having a running track up here on the 2nd floor, and I hope we're able to afford that. And then there's the lobby coming in. It's only 2 stories high. It's not an atrium. It's just a gathering space there. And the last slide I show you here is one we can't afford. We've just found out that what we have invented, I guess, for this hospital here was the typical patient room, which we've worked long and hard on. Everything works, I think, brilliantly for the bed and the bathroom, and the pull-out chair becomes a bed and so on. But we have this little alcove called family alcove, not big enough as a room, it's really larger than an alcove. But there's a little desk over here and a TV set, and then a chair that pulls out into a bed, and this one turns and goes into a bed as well. So if this is a child here, the parents can stay over for the night, and that's what the child needs, is the empathy that gives them, having mom and dad there. Or if a grown-up is in this chair, it might be your mother-in-law, you want to be here. Well, some of you want to be there. Or if it's your mother, let's say, then you want to be caring for her, or somebody in the family will. So we wanted to do this, but it looks like that's going to be axed from the budget, because this isn't a good time for philanthropy, and it's very hard for these institutions to get money. So, of course, one F-18 would pay for the whole, all the hospitals in Nebraska. Never mind this one in Omaha. So I've given you a lot to chew on, and I hope you can take something away from it. Thank you very much. They're shy. Yes.
Perfect.
Hi. I've been a proponent of the shower entries for a long time, and I still am finding resistance in some of the building departments for multi-story families to be able to, when I'm renovating a bathroom and putting a shower in, they're still saying to me, well, you know, you need to put that curb in because, you know, it's a multi-story building, and you don't want water running around anywhere. So how are you or your group, or you're finding some of your colleagues, what kind of arguments are you using now to be able to argue against that?
I just tell them, no, that's not true. I've got one, and it works brilliantly, and yours will too. I've been asked by a company to design the little grate that goes over it, which doesn't mean anything. It's just lets the water in. But it's really no different than a central drain. What's expensive is to make the change from a central drain to a trough drain, because you need the water to move to one edge of the room. I heard of somebody who had it going to the back side of the room. I hadn't considered that because I didn't want any water in my bathroom, so I stopped it with my trough drain. But that's just a matter of your persuasiveness. There's no law that says it has to be a central drain. And I'm on the President's ADA committee called the Access Board, and we deal with this kind of stuff all the time. And it's one of my hot topics, is that thing, because I was in, as I told you, I was in 4 rehab centers. They all had curb.
Questions?
Okay.
Are there any ways of adapting these ideas to regular dwellings? Because people come home from rehab and they have to deal with the horribleness of the way things are designed in most houses.
Right. You're absolutely, it's a $64,000 question, and it really needs to happen. I've designed 6 hotels in a little island called Sentosa near Singapore, and I have these trough drains in all the hotels. I ran up against resistance with my own designers. And I said, no, I'm going to win this one, so let's not argue anymore. And they said, this one's on you, Michael. And I said, fine, I'll take it. But you're right. We hear about aging in place and keeping your house and all. Well, houses need help. You know, you need to re-roof it occasionally, and you need to re-sod it, you need to repoint it, you need to keep your house up. The house isn't a refrigerator. It needs to be cared for. And I think those kinds of things need to be budgeted. But there's nobody yet who has made a list of those things that the common man could think about when he or she is thinking about aging in place. What do I need to do to my bathroom? We've just been asked by one agency to make drawings, make plans for an ideal bathroom in a hospital. But you've given me an idea. I'm glad you asked that question. Why not extend it to all of us right now? Not just for the elders, but for all houses. It just makes more sense. I don't know whether you know this or not, but the way you bathe when you're someone like me paralyzed is in a chair. You bathe in a wheelchair. The wheelchair is aluminum and doesn't rust. It's not this chair. But you get into that chair and you're wheeled in, or you wheel yourself in and bathe yourself. But I think that would be a great thing for me to do, is to make kind of a laundry list of that would make it a more functional bathroom for all of us. Thank you.
So an excellent question.
Yeah, it really was.
In terms of the bathrooms that you've designed, I've looked at these toilets oftentimes for the ADA, and if people are paralyzed on one side, how can they make the transfer to the toilet if it's the wrong side that they have to transfer?
They can't.
So what do you do?
Either the toilet is on the center of the wall, so they can get the transfer chair on the other side, or they get help.
Is there any way that there could be a toilet that pivots?
There's a toilet what?
That pivots.
A toilet pivot. I'm just working through that a minute. I probably can't answer that because I don't know. Maybe there could be, but I wouldn't want it to be cumbersome. What you could do, perhaps, is to if you have a walker, to take your walker with you if you're alone, and transfer. But that's a great question too. I hadn't thought about it being on the wrong side. What the question is, making the transfer. Transfers are difficult moments. When I transfer, like tomorrow I'm going to Chicago, and I'll have to get into an aisle chair in the airport. I'll put this arm up like this, and I'll transfer from here to there. Well, I need help to do that because I don't have the strength at my age to move this much of my body just with my arms. So I'll have two guys, one on my feet, one on my arms, move me across. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's so much easier when you have help and you're not alone. But there are, of course, people who've had a stroke and their toilet is on the wrong side of their stroke side, and they're hosed. They really need to get it rethought, and so that's a conundrum.
Where do you think the focus of healthcare design is going, or should be going, in the next 10, 15, 20 years? Is it technology integration? Is it kind of taking these simple, quote unquote, the toilet, the shower, these things that able-bodied people find to be, you don't even think about, and reworking those to become more useful or Or is it something else that went on?
That's one thing that will happen.
Thinking about-
And then how you design it from scratch. When a builder in Tucson builds a new group of houses, is he thinking about who's going to have this house afterwards? Is this couple going to live in it for the rest of their lives? Are they going to live in it when they're 85? All of those things, you have to think about the longevity of it, and we're too smart as a culture not to get after that right now. And so when it's going to be, I don't know, but I'm doing my best.
Don't you think that perhaps, or do you think that perhaps because the baby boomers are aging now, there is likely to be enough political pressure to get some of this legislated, since we can't necessarily count on developers doing it out of the kindness of their hearts?
Can you hear John Boehner say no? 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 I mean, we can't get food stamps, we're not going to get, don't get me started. These questions are political, though. Don't kid yourself. We're not going to get any of this from our Congress. We have to, yes, perhaps we could have a sit-in, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to take people like your students and me and others who are dealing with these questions to make inroads into this, so that the so-called experts, the three-letter firms that are big commercial firms that do most of the hospitals, will have to keep up. And that'll be great for the hospitals, but it needs to be there for the houses too. So we need to get a lot of publicity after some of these things get built. But I have no faith that a sit-in would work. I'm saying sit-in, sit-in in quotes, how we could put pressure on the Congress to do something when our children are going starving and we can get $10.10 for minimum wage. Where do we live? Yes.
Are there architecture programs that specialize in hospital design?
There's an interior design program.
Yes, there are. I'm not very, I know at the University of Cincinnati they do, because they asked me to do some things with them, but I don't know how far they go with it, and I don't know whether they can teach empathy, because that's one of the things we need. I told a story earlier in an interview about one day I was in rehab, and I was before I could get into my chair myself, but there's a device called a Hoyer lift, H-O-Y-E-R, Hoyer lift, and the Hoyer lift straps onto you, or you get yourself into a kind of net, and it lifts you up and takes you over and drops you into your chair carefully. Well, I was this far, and my nurse's aide was encountered by one of her friends who came in and said, "Mabel, this is our break time." And she said, "You've got to come. We've only got 15 minutes. I can't go now. I've got him up in the air." "No, he'll be here when you get back." True story. Now these people make $7 an hour. You know what that is a year?
Did she leave you there?
Yeah. But the nurse passed by and I yelled out to her, and I didn't want to get the nurse's aide in trouble. These are not smart people. I'm very sympathetic toward their plight. They don't make enough money to do anything else but go on their break. We're kind of upside down completely. These people should be making $20,000, $30,000 a year. They make 14. You can't live on that. Single parents, all of that. But I tell you the stories like that because I want the students to understand that it isn't just a matter of put lines on the paper. You've got to read the paper. You've got to understand what's going on and who are your friends and who are not, and how you should vote. It's so important not to say no, but to have a society where you can say yes.
Thank you very much.
One more.
One more question.
How do you educate people about disabilities and people, including your clients, with interior design and architecture?
How do I do it?
How do you educate them? Yes. How do you teach
Well,
them?
personally, I give lectures like this because I'm not teaching anymore. I taught at Princeton for 39 years. But the last thing they wanted to hear about was with healthcare design. They wanted to be part of the lunatic fringe. We're getting them now in towers in New York. I suppose you could lobby the schools or find out which schools do offer healthcare design. Go visit them, see what they do. Is that the meat of your question?
No, it's mostly about interior design. How we, without saying it,
Yeah.
without the lecture, how can we show it and present it to our clients?
Just the way I do. Nobody taught me. You're just as smart as I am. Go to the hospital. Observe. Look at what they're doing. Take notes. Ask questions. Go to another hospital. I went to 44 hospitals in Europe and in the United States to see what I should be doing. I did diligence. And you've got to do that. I already had experience in my own dilemma with my own paralysis, but I didn't trust that. That wasn't enough. I didn't know about people putting sheets on chairs and so on. It's not a big deal. But if I can stop one person from falling because they're tripping on the sheet, or keeping the sheet from falling on the floor where it has to be cleaned again, so much the better. But your eyes have to be opened. And you have to be, since nobody's going to teach you this stuff, because quite frankly, I don't know whether the teachers know either. Mine didn't know. So you have to do it. But then mine didn't know Palladio either. Do Palladio before you do healthcare.
Michael, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.